All right, folks, welcome back to Mike and Maurice's Mind Escape. We have episode 53 today. How were the pyramids really built? Um, Happy Valentine's Day to everybody out there.
Ooh, baby, yeah.
And check out our website, Mike and Maurice, mindescape.com. And also check out our Patreon page at patreon.com/Mike and Maurice. All right, Maurice. So,
Good word there.
what I know we've talked about this a little bit in the past episodes, but I wanted to focus on it on this episode and all the different theories and stuff. Um, Initially, when we began the podcast, we were looking at stuff like, oh, slaves built the pyramids or this or that. After everything we've learned and gone through, what's your outlook on it now? Like, do you have any theories or takes on it, or?
Well, yeah, me and Rob took a class, our cousin Rob, back in, I don't even know how long ago that was, probably 8 years or so. And they taught, I think at that point they were saying that slaves couldn't have built it. It's the amount of, the sheer amount of people that worked on it. And I don't know. So that
What
fact, I
what
think, is,
class? What was this?
well, funny. I think it was a film class actually because we were watching some like old films about the pyramids being built, and then like the Ten Commandments, all those old movies, they pretty much portray the people building them slaves, and then we were discussing like the truth behind some of those movies, and I think that the consensus was no, slaves did not build it, but maybe I don't know. I'm not sure if that was just there was a theory being thrown around.
Okay, so one of the mainstream theories, I don't, according to Bob Breer, who's a um, archaeologist, he in one of his lectures talks about how they think that during the flooding seasons of the Nile, like when the Nile would overflow, the farmers couldn't farm anymore. So
Right.
those skilled laborers would go to the pyramids and work on this thing.
Yeah, and then
Now,
that government or whatever would pay them or feed them or whatever.
now that being said, supposedly the Great Pyramid was built in 20 years by Khafre from the Fourth Dynasty.
Okay.
But I mean, 20 years, you look at the thing like, is it possible? I mean, anything's possible, but I think 20 years is kind of I mean, some of those cathedrals in Europe took, a long time. So, you look
Wait,
at,
so are you disputing that it took longer or shorter than 20 years?
I think it took longer. I don't
Yeah,
know how
I
much
agree for
longer,
sure.
but I mean, I don't know if that's even like a rough estimate, but like that's what the mainstream thing that I've seen is 20 years.
Yeah, we were in Miami over Christmas break, and they were building these buildings. This one was like a really crazy design that some I think they were like Chinese. I don't even know. I don't want to say, but the architect actually it took so long for the building to be constructed. The architect passed away before it was actually built. And we're talking about in our day with massive technologies, you know.
Right.
So and that took at least I think this thing took 7 to 10 years. So
Wow. Yeah, that's a long time.
well, what about like the buildings in Chicago?
Well, I mean, some of the, those don't take super long. I mean,
Well, like the Sears Tower. I mean,
I don't know how long that you'd have to look that up. I mean, I'm
I feel.
sure
What am I doing?
it's yeah. I don't know. If I had to guess, maybe a few years, but
Right.
I have no idea. Um, so, but there's different theories too. Like even within the mainstream, just like anything else. Like we just had, the last couple episodes have been science based. One of them being, a physicist, Brian Keating, and even within science, there's competing theories for one mainstream theory or a few mainstream theories. So even within these um, ideas and structures and theories and hypothesis is other little competing subsets and subsidiaries. Um,
Right.
so for my outlook on it, I try and gather as much information as possible. There was a special on, I don't know if it was the History Channel or maybe it might have been another channel. Actually, I'm not sure. Um, But there was that same guy, that Bob Breer guy that I was talking about. Um, basically, there's this guy, Jean Pierre. He's this French guy. He's like a
Oh, Jean
uh,
Pierre.
but I think, yeah, Jean Pierre Houdin. He's like a French engineer guy, and he quit his job and dedicated his life to figuring out what the deal with the Great Pyramid is, how they built it. It was just something that baffled this guy. And he's just an engineer. He's not like an archaeologist or an Egyptologist or anything like that. Um, but his theory, he used computer models and data sets. And there was also work done by, I think, um, I forget what country it was from, but these in the 80s, I think it was either Russia or China or one of those countries over there. They did some sort of like thermal scan or something, and they found that there was this like pattern that like went, around and then in, almost like, internally. So he came up with this thing. It's called the internal ramp theory, um, in which the blocks at the base would be built, and then the blocks would be moved along, kind of like a spiral all the way up, and some of them
Yeah.
would go inside, and that's what they think, like like the King's Chamber, like that elevated platform all the way up, that was a platform to raise the blocks and move the blocks around, because there's actual like grooves and stuff in there as well. So yeah, I mean that's one of the theories I've seen. Another theory is the external ramp theory, which is that there's this massive ramp that was built, like up to
These
the
fucking
side of
guys.
well up to the side of it, and then they would lift the blocks on in place and move them around and stuff like that. Now,
Yeah.
the problem I've heard and seen with that theory, me personally, I mean, I'm not an expert or anything, but just logistically, I think they said that there would need to be more blocks used for the ramp than the actual pyramid itself,
Right.
which, I mean, you look at that and then, but then,
Counterintuitive, you
well,
think,
but
you
then
know?
they say though, too, like within that theory is the people that are proponents of that theory. Oh, well, they probably use that material then towards the top or whatever. But that still seems like a lot of work
Ah,
for no reason. But, and that's, but like, even you look at like John Anthony West and like stuff like Magical Egypt, which are all great things. Um, you know, they talk about an older time, Zep Tepi, like the first time, which is like 35,000 years ago, during a couple processional cycles ago, basically. Um, and what they think that, I don't know if they think I forget, I think John Anthony thought that the Sphinx was dated back to around then. But the Great Pyramid might have been like 10,500 BC when it was supposedly aligned with Orion's belt.
right, right.
And that's more like Robert Ball, and Graham Hancock are huge proponents of that. Um,
Well, here's a weird thing. I don't know if my computer's listening to me, but I typed in how long does it take to build Sears Tower, and it came up. It says 3 years, 20,000 workers. Then it says it took ancient Egyptians 20 years in the same little snidbit. So
that's weird that I said 3 years. That was a guess.
yeah, no. So I don't know. That's actually contradictory to what I was thinking. So yeah, maybe they did. Maybe I mean 20 years is a long fucking time. I don't know how many workers they estimate that they had going for them, but we can kind of break it down if we see that 2,000 workers 3 years in 1973. So
Well, the other thing too is, what was the structure of these, like, were I mean, if you look at it, they've got to be kind of skilled labor. They can't, like that was the
right.
thing.
But
Like
that's
you
the other
can't.
good thing. That's a good point, though. Look at the structures. This thing was built in 3 years. It would probably collapse in, I don't even know, 10 years. If the world went to hell in a
Well,
handbag.
if we all died, I think if for what you're talking about, where the steel would be pitted and everything would start
Right.
crumbling and all that, I think that would take, if I'm not mistaken, like 200, 300
Oh,
years.
all
It'd
right.
probably be gone. You probably wouldn't see it in like 1,000 years, like
Okay.
completely. So like
So look at the
that
time they
that's
spent.
still, well, I mean, that's still like you could fit five dynastic Egypts ago in that time frame. You know what I'm saying? Like you could have, five that's 4,500 years ago is what, mainstream says the or 2,500
Right. Well,
BC.
it's a perfect example of how stuff's built these days. It's just junk, man. You build have shit back in the day. It's made out
Right.
of stone. It's made out of real metal. Even if you look at like the air vents in housing,
But
like
here's the thing though
go
with
ahead.
that is like I agree with you. Like, yeah, they had some sort of ancient knowledge or ancient building, but y-
They just use
not
quality stuff,
well, here's the
man.
thing is not everything if their houses aren't built like pyramids, because
That's true. That's
I
true.
mean there are cool other structures and temples and different things. I'm not saying that there's not, but
Yeah.
there's not a many great pyramids or like if it was that easy of a thing or if it was that
Oh, I
common,
never said it was easy. I'm just
no,
saying
no,
they
no,
took
I'm
more
just,
care and time and
yeah,
effort, it seems.
I'm merely pointing out the fact that I think that it was more of a effort, like a group effort. Like
Right.
it wasn't, like I said, I find the slave thing hard to swallow because um those people would need to be skilled. You're not going to get a slave. You're not going to
Right.
teach a slave architecture and you're going to have them carry things and do things and get on them, and they're, it shows of old movies where they're, whipping people and beating people and doing all. I mean,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
seriously. I mean, watch any of
I
the old
know.
movies. Like
Ben Hur.
that's what they're doing. But in reality, I don't think that that's an effective way to get stuff built. I think those people were probably not there against their own will. Like maybe it was a gather. Like, yeah, you could. The pharaoh could have said, "Let's do this," and they could have all just gotten on board. That's one of the options. Another option would be like what I said, which is another mainstream one, where during the flooding seasons, all the skilled um, farmers and laborers weren't able to farm and stuff, so they headed over there and did their thing with the pyramid.
Well, yeah, if they had no choice, if they went into a serious drought and they provided food, why, that's
I mean,
kind of slave and it's kind of not slave.
there's some people think the Great Pyramid is like a silo for housing stuff.
Oh,
There's no evidence of that.
yeah.
There's not like there's leftover grains at the bottom of the pyramid or anything like that. And if you were to do that, you would want it to be a lot more hollowed out if that was the case, anyways. Egypt could have looked a lot different too. We know that there's water erosion around the base of the Sphinx, which are vertical fissures, which, Dr. Robert Schoch talks about
Shack,
how
yeah.
he saw it within like 30 seconds of seeing the Sphinx. He's like, this thing's older than it really is. So
Yeah, yeah.
that's a geologist that's gone to, Yale, and he teaches at Boston College. He's not just some, you know,
Quack.
yeah.
I like
Um,
that they might be like a power plant of some sort.
So that is that's a cool theory. That's I think Chris Dunn, who's an engineer, if I'm not mistaken, wrote a book about like the pyramids being a power plant kind of
Uh-huh.
a situation, where kind of using Tesla's
Right.
ideas where there's an aquifer underneath the Great Pyramid, and once water would get into the aquifer and create some sort of like friction under there, it then would, you know, push the energy up through the pyramid, and it would be basically like some sort of vibrational technology. Some people think it could have been like a light source. Some people think it could have been some sort of, you know, uh, like just power in general.
Yeah, essentially an ancient power plant.
Well, yeah, I mean, if it's creating, if like, and I've heard some people say, like, I think was Graham Hancock on Joe Rogan where he talks about when you go to Egypt and you're at the Great Pyramids, you can feel like there's like a static charge in the air, like there's a feel,
Uh-huh.
like there's something that you can feel within the air.
Right. The
Obviously, I've
Grateful
never,
Dead said that they felt something,
yeah,
but they were on acid.
that might be the best person to ask then. I mean, if you're taken out of your own element and you feel something like that, but
Right, but they also said that
that
they
was their
played
worst show.
poorly.
Yeah,
The
that
Grateful
was
Dead we're talking about.
Jerry talks about how that was his worst or one of his worst shows, and he felt like that was one of his disappointments was that he didn't play better or one of those. But
Yeah.
but yeah, so the power plant idea is cool. But yeah, and the other thing too is they think there was, well, we know that there was more water in that region at some point, whether
Right.
it was a long time ago. I mean, like we know the Nile floods. How much does it flood? You know, that you see some of these mock-up pictures or fake pictures of the pyramid sometimes, or like what it used to look like, and sometimes they'll show water around the whole complex. So it's
Well,
literally the
that brings up a good point, because that was one of the things I was watching, was that they might have floated the stone somehow and like
well,
used
that
water
is
to bring it up
yeah,
above.
that is one of the main theories that they found a papyrus. I think it's Narmer, maybe I forget the name. Yeah, I think it's Narmer. I'm not. I could be mistaken. But they found a papyrus about how they think that some of the blocks were transported, and they would use the boats and um,
They
you know,
found this on a writing of some sort?
I think so. Look, see if you can
Damn, yeah, let me
find
see
the
if I can find that. I can't even
um,
spell half those words, but I'll try.
Narmer papyrus. Maybe I could be wrong. I don't. I forget. I know they recently.
Do you know anything more about that? Let's talk a little about that.
Uh, so um, yeah, no, I'm just trying to remember what I do know about that. Um,
They said that they found the stone because they know that the stone they used was from kind of far away.
okay, so well, the granite that they use is from Aswan, which is not that close. I mean, it's not super far, but it's not that close
Right.
to Giza. So, um, yeah, see if you can. Here, I'll see if I can pull up a picture here. Um, but
So
I think,
what's the other option? They either float it, they fucking haul it.
well, I mean, all the theories go from, well, okay, so we know that most of the stone came from around the pyramids. There is the quarries there where you can see where they were digging it out. Um, in terms of uh, let's see here. Um, yeah, we know that they were getting most of the blocks from there, but like, granite, any granite that's been used in ancient Egypt comes from Aswan. Um, there's a specific red granite that can be found in like the Hypogeum and stuff like that too. Um, but when you look at the actual, when you think about how they constructed it, like forget theories on what it could have been or whatever. I mean, logistically, when you look at how were these blocks being moved, how were they being carried? I mean, the ramp thing, you would need the ramp plus tons of people carrying it. I think that was the other flaw from what I've seen with the ramp theory, is that the ramp would need to be so wide because you would need so many people pulling this thing,
Yeah,
or
dudes would be fucking getting crushed all the time, man.
yeah, or getting falling off the side of this ramp and all sorts of shit. Um, but uh, when you think about the when they showed what when that guy Jean Pierre, his he made some good points with the internal ramp theory, which is an easier way to move it. Now it's still hard. I don't think it's easy, but maybe using certain angles and different things, it's a lot easier than it should be.
Yeah.
Plus, the
Well,
ancient Egyptians were super smart. I mean, I think that's the main problem, is like a lot of archaeologists and mainstream people, they get mad at people that come up with like ancient aliens and some of these alternative theories, but their theories themselves are just as demeaning towards those people, like, oh, this was just
yeah,
the highest technology that they had, or they couldn't have
right.
possibly
Well, I'm
known how to
looking at
do this.
they said they used 100,000 workers, which may or may not be true, but
And
that's a lot of people.
that's a lot of people. And if that is true, let's just say hypothetically, then I'm sure there was some sort of system that was used to do this sort of thing.
Right.
I mean, who knows?
There's more of a catalyst than I'm gonna whip you in the back.
Well, yeah, I mean, okay, so but like we said, was it 100,000 people that were there against their will, or was it 100,000 people that are skilled laborers that are just contributing? I think it would be the latter if you're asking me, because I don't think I mean, it's
How many
possible.
people even live there then? I'm gonna find that out.
Yeah, you look it up, young Jamie. Um,
Hey, young Kevy.
um,
He's
I,
you're never gonna get straight answers though. They can't.
well,
What are we gonna
that's just
say?
the thing too. I mean, and that's why I think a lot of people get mad too. Is there's a lot of push. Oh, we know everything. Everything's figured out. Well, no, because if that was the case, you would tell me exactly how it's done, and people would recreate it. Like that's what people do. Like there is this one video um on YouTube. I don't know what the name of it is. I'm sure if you looked enough, you could find it. But it's this guy that lives in Michigan. He's like a contractor, construction worker, who started building these heavy ass blocks in his backyard, like similar to the ones used in the Great Pyramid.
Uh huh.
And he was able to use just wood and stuff and like use them in a certain way and distribute the weight and um different ways, and he was able to move these things himself, like these huge freaking blocks, just himself.
Right.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
I think there is ways to do stuff. There is another weird guy that built this thing called Coral Castle in Florida. I think that's what it's called, Coral Castle, where he it was said that he built this thing himself for his wife that like left him, or he was waiting for his wife, or something like that. And somehow these heavy ass coral blocks he moved by himself. Some people say he had this weird device. Some people think he was like levitating these blocks and like different things. And I
Yeah.
know that that's one of the quackier theories, that the blocks were just of the Great Pyramid were levitated into place. Now,
Uh huh.
I don't think that's the case, but for the sake of, you know, what we're talking about, we know vibration can move things into patterns, right? Like
Oh yeah.
if there was a strong enough sound or signal or noise, or you could, now we know again that I don't think that's the case. They
Well,
would
listen to
what?
this theory, because what if an asteroid hit and then the stone that it exploded from the asteroid collision built the pyramids?
That's way too crazy.
Well, that's the exact same thing as how DNA was created. So suck my balls. Seriously, you call that wacky?
I mean, you don't think that's wacky?
Oh, it's off the rocker wacky, man.
So wait,
That's
so okay,
moronic.
so this thing's saying that an asteroid hit and the
No,
asteroid
no,
the
I'm making that up. There's
oh,
nothing saying that.
oh,
I'm
I
just
thought
saying if
you were
you
like you just said that I'm reading this right here.
no, 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 no. I'm just saying if you believe that, then you can believe in DNA. It's the same thing.
Well, what's the that we always talk about? What's the analogy? It's like
The
a tornado.
plane being
No,
yeah,
a
yeah.
tornado going through a junkyard and assembling a 746.
737.
Yeah. So I mean, if yeah, but that's our DNA. That's a little bit different than a physical megalithic
Well,
structure.
let's say our Earth existed for infinite time, over that many collisions. If an asteroid hits the Earth infinite times, one of those chances it can build the
Well, I mean,
pyramids. That's what they're saying. But
well, no, I
essentially,
know. I'm just saying we know we're not infinite. I mean, you want to say old, I could get
right?
on that, but you don't want to say infinite. I mean, if our Earth, um, okay, so humans, Homo sapien humans have been around since pretty sure 200,000, maybe 300,000 years ago. There's some people will even go back to a million. I don't, I know that that's always a changing field as well. Every time they find a new um,
Yeah,
skull
yeah.
or so even two, let's just say 200,000 years ago. Okay. Look at where we've come in 200 years, from horse and buggy, most places didn't have running water. Um,
True.
all that kind of like, look at where technology's come in just 200 years. Now think about 200,000 years ago. Um, even if you, let's just say 50,000 years in, yeah, we were probably Denisovans and, or not, I'm sorry, not to say, we were probably early Homo sapiens that have recently either extinct or were, in competing with the Denisovans and the Neanderthals and stuff like that. But I mean, when you look at it, we're still modern humans, so
Correct.
to think, that we couldn't have come up with the stuff that we've come up with recently, or we couldn't have come up with it before. I think that that's entirely possible, that, you know, there is something to be said about, like you always see these things like, oh, remembering our past, or, what do they say? I know, like Graham Hancock's like a species with amnesia, like
Yeah.
we've forgotten or lost or been hidden or whatever you want to say, that there's a different history than, or, you know, we're human beings too. That's the other thing, is like, can you remember every single thing you did 5 years ago? Like, can you remember? And we're relying on accounts of people that lived so long ago, 4,500 years ago, or 2,500 BC, according to mainstream. That's a long time. There's a lot of telephone being played. There's a lot of, even if it's written down then, that's,
Yeah.
what does that say?
So this is just some stuff I was looking. This is a PBS special, or that Nova show,
Yeah.
and they had Graham Hancock on there and stuff. But I don't know. It's saying that the Greek historians, they believe that they said 100,000 workers, but then they said that only 20 to 30,000 people lived in Egypt at the time, or whatever. So
So there you go. So if you were to ask me what I think it's
there's your
more.
boy.
That's a young picture of him. If you were to ask me what I think of it, I think it's probably true that there was a lot less. There was just a lot more ingenuity, a lot more
Yeah, these
advanced
people cared about
technology.
it.
Yeah, a lot more advanced technology for the time. The other thing is, what you said. I mean, there's, let's say the pyramids were built 10,500 years ago. Well, we just had George Howard on, where we were talking about the Younger Dryas,
Hmm.
12,000 years ago, or 11,600, whatever. Um, when you look at that, so something could have happened. They could have built the pyramid, just like how people think Göbekli Tepe was built, as some sort of remembrance of the past, or same, the same thing could be said about,
Yeah.
um, the ancient, or the Great Pyramids. Now, the thing about the Great Pyramids that's unique, like I said, it's we attribute it to, there's enough temples and hieroglyphs and stuff that we attribute the pyramid, to Khafre, like I said, fourth dynasty, Old Kingdom. Um, you know,
Yeah. He might have just moved in and
well, okay, so, and
took control over the project.
they're all building pyramids. His dad Djedefre, and then his son Khufu. Khufu also built stuff, pyramids.
Yeah.
Now, you look at that, yeah, that's entirely plausible, and I'm not even disputing that. But I think that when you look at the evidence too, um, there's not, like, in the actual pyramid, if you just built something that big, okay, you're a pharaoh, you're gonna only put, like, I think the only way we know that is from the inside, that's of stuff that's actually on the pyramid. Um, that there's like a, what you call it, like a not hieroglyphs, but like graffiti style hieroglyphs on the inside. And the way we know that is there was a, British soldier and Egyptologist named Howard Weiss, who went to Egypt. I think they used, like, because back then, I don't think people were getting into the Great Pyramid, so they used dynamite, if I'm not mistaken, not to, like, destroy it, but just to blow, like,
These guys.
openings into it to get in there.
Yeah.
Um, but in terms of, what he did, so I think it was 1837, I believe. Um, yeah, he found, um, surrounding quarry marks and different stuff, alluding to the fact that Khafre built that. Some people say that he didn't want to go home empty-handed. Like, he didn't want to go back to Britain with nothing to show for his expedition.
Yeah.
So they came up with that themselves, or drew that themselves, or however you want to, say that. But
Yeah.
in terms of, he had a they look at stuff like his journal and stuff like that. Um, Basically, that this guy's the stuff that he did was taken as like a fact when nobody even questioned, his motives or what he actually found. Um, but basically, um, they found the Khufu cartouche, and they think it everybody goes by that as the main academic thing or the main academic timeline, okay? And we base a lot of other stuff off of that too, in terms of the way that what we know dynastic Egypt and the
Yeah,
progression
throw
and
that in
everything.
the garbage can.
Um, so it's specifically based on that date. But I don't know what to think. I mean, in one hand, I want to say, okay, yeah, I mean, but maybe the mainstream's right. However, evidence isn't like if you were to take that to court, would that hold up in court? I don't know. I don't
Yeah,
think
I don't
so.
think so.
Yeah. Um,
It's funny these guys don't play by their own games. It's like let's believe in this stuff, teach all our
well,
kids,
yeah. I mean,
but
look
you
at
can't even
what
prove it.
we just had Brian Keating on. He's talking about how many times they redo and perform these experiments. And you look at when scientists talk about scientific method, and if they're a good scientist, they're emotionless about it. They're just receiving data and redoing experiments and doing different things. But we're all flawed humans. There's going to be some sort of
Right.
agenda or human error at some point. Even if you're the best at what you do, there's still got to be some sort of room for error. Um, as far as
Let's get back to the point here. How do we think they were built?
so I personally, I don't know. I like this guy's internal RAM theory that Jean Pierre. It could be.
Yeah.
It might even be. I mean, this was a couple years ago. I think it
That's
might
a good
even.
theory because everything else has been kind of a little bit tested at least. When you're saying we're going internally, now you still have some hope because they haven't done that many tests internally, you know?
Right. Right.
So
But
it's a good theory. It's a good theory at least.
um,
I don't think I'm gonna go out on a limb and say I 100% believe that I don't think that slaves didn't build it. That's just me now. Let's
no,
calm down,
I
calm
won't.
down.
I'll agree 100% with that. That that I think is to me is a no brainer. Now
Yeah.
from there, what's going
Macomb
on?
Community College got something right. I'll tell you.
Um,
shout out Macomb, baby.
you went to didn't you get all your credits mostly at Western though?
Yeah, I got one semester at Western.
Oh, I thought you
Let's
got
not
all.
let's not get crazy here, man. I didn't graduate.
um, yeah, you got to go to the school of fucking life now, bro.
Hard
Because
knocks.
yeah,
Can you tell how I formulate sentences? It's very smooth. It's very educated.
um, but so yeah. Oh, but basically, I just wanted to say that Howard Weiss, yeah, he found the cartouches. That's what they base it off of. But when you look at like evidence of like weathering on the Sphinx and was the Sphinx built at the same time as the pyramids, we don't, that's what
Mhm.
kind of it's alluded to, but the Sphinx has weathering or around the base, which is where they quarried the blocks for the Sphinx temple. So they think that those blocks are a lot older. So, I think that when you look at history. We're relying on something that somebody did from the 1800s. We're relying on Napoleon's expeditions there. We're
Well, we're not
relying.
relying on it. The academia
Well,
is
yeah,
relying on
they and it should be said too. I think there needs to be more geologists and more geology, and I'm sure there are a lot doing. I'm not saying that there's
it. Yeah.
not, but even just like one dude like Robert Schock, I know that there's other people that feel that same way. I've talked to some people online on Reddit and stuff. As much as there's a bunch of assholes that are like, "Oh, you don't know what you're talking about." There are some cool people that are in the field that kind of agree with the sentiment that stuff is possibly older than said to be. However, it's kind of shunned to do that work. Like these people, aren't being you know, backed to do this kind of research. It's just not something that is worth. the money or the time
Yeah.
of universities and grants and
Yeah,
all
they
sorts
already
of.
checked it off. They go, "We figured that one out.
Yeah,
We're not giving you
exactly.
any more money."
So in that sense, I think we need more geologists and actual scientists doing some of these datings. And you can't obviously radiocarbon date rock, but you can date, weathering patterns. You can date layers of sediment. You can, do all that kind of stuff. So I think that there's something there. And most Egyptologists, from what I've seen, I'll talk to people on Reddit and say, "Oh, I'm an art history major," or they don't have any scientific background. A lot of them are coming from, like I just said, art history backgrounds or anthropology, like that kind of stuff, which is still great, obviously, but at,
Yeah.
at the same time, like I think specifically for Egypt, for the region that it's in, the weathering and all the stuff, I think you do need actual scientists and geologists and different people to come in and look at it. Even if you got some real high level architects too, to kind of like that Jean Pierre guy was an engineer and an architect. You get people like that, they kind of get into the brain of the people, at the time. Like
Mhm.
what were they thinking? What tools did they have to use? That's another weird thing. Okay, so supposedly we're supposed to believe that all those blocks, even the hard Aswan granite, was cut using copper tools. Now, the copper that they had like a hint of arsenic in it, which supposedly made it a little bit stronger. Um, but if you've ever seen videos on these people trying to cut these blocks with these copper tools, it's pretty
Pretty
tedious just to
funny.
watch. Well, it's pretty tedious just to watch it because you're literally getting like a millimeter for fucking hours,
Yeah. Yeah.
So in that regard, there must have been a different technique. And even when Joe Rogan had Robert Schock on his podcast, they were showing drill holes in certain of the pottery in ancient Egypt, and drill holes in certain other things and temples and stuff. So I think, did they have like these ancient drills that weren't necessarily powered by electricity? Sure, that they could have came up with some system, but when you look at the precision on some of those things, there's got to be something more to that. Like I said, we think of these people as, you know, we think of life as a progression, right? Like when
Right.
you think of everything happened in order and we're here today, which again could be the case. But I think it's very possible that at some point we knew more than we did or we do now in certain regards, whether it's spirituality, whether it's cosmology. Like most people back then would look up towards the sky and at least ponder. Most people don't go outside at night at all now. They have houses, they don't look up at the sky. There's a change in culture where more people are concerned about technology, TV. People aren't going in their backyards, and I'm sure there are people that do, obviously, but for the
Well,
most part,
less and less by the
yeah, yeah,
day.
for the most part, back then, it's like if you lived in ancient Egypt, you were confronted by the stars, like you were every
Yeah.
night, there was no way around it. When it got dark, you were there.
Mhm.
So I think that's part of it. I think it's just a cultural thing. So I think that there's certain things that, people knew back then that we don't know now, obviously. And the fact that we don't know how they figured out exactly north, south, east, west, the directional patterns for the Great Pyramid. There's a lot of mysterious things about it. And, there's a cool book by Ed Nightingale called The Giza Template. We talked about it a little bit with Laird Scranton because he helped them publish it. But, that's all about how the whole plaza, the Giza Plateau, is like I just the basically the title, that the Giza template. It's like a template. Like there's just a bunch of geometrical shapes, and there's some symbology and meaning. They believe, like how we looked at the Temple of Man at Luxor, with Schwaller de Lubitz, that on the Laird Scranton episode. So I mean, it's it's one of those things where it's like I do think that they were advanced for their time, and I do believe they had certain knowledges that maybe we don't possess today. Now, was it to the point
But you're not, yeah,
where
you're not going crazy saying these guys had power plants, they were powering the
no,
whole
no, no.
world.
Is it possible? Yeah. I mean, look, like I just said, a whole building can erode. In New York's, or if we died tomorrow, 1,000 years from now, the Earth would look a lot different. Everything would be covered in vegetation and growth. You wouldn't see buildings and structures like you would, and if they are, they're covered in
Yeah, the
vine.
disease would be gone.
Well, I mean, for us,
No, we are the disease, bro.
okay, so yeah, you could say
I'm
that
just
in there. No, no, I mean that's true in the sense that we're harming the earth, we're harming the environment. We're looking to now get out in space and really start doing the same thing out there.
we got
um,
a whole fucking universe to blast off into, man.
um,
Wreck
but
it.
we're basically on a spaceship. It's called Spaceship Earth.
Yeah.
But yeah, so those are the primary theories on this. You know, like I said, if Gobekli's a little bit different. So if you look at the 10,500 timeline, or for Giza, or you look at like Gobekli Tepe, which um,
It
11
doesn't
11,600 years ago. I think even though Gobekli Tepe is impressive, I
I
do
was gonna
think,
say the magnitude just isn't the same.
well, the magnitude is not the same, and then the craftsmanship. Is Gobekli Tepe nice and advanced looking for its time? Yes, absolutely.
It's alright, yeah.
Yeah, but compared to the Great Pyramid, I don't think it's even a comparison. Now,
Right.
is there stuff that we haven't uncovered yet? Is there stuff that's missing? Sure, maybe we'll fill in those timelines later, but I think it's safe to say that Gobekli Tepe, as of right now, is the oldest. Possibly the Sphinx with the weather erosion around the base, and it could have been a completely different thing at some point. Here's the thing: is
Yeah.
we keep restoring the Sphinx, we keep adding layers and restoring the stone and everything right now.
Yeah,
You
there's a
don't
whole hotel in there at this
you don't
point.
you don't think that back in ancient times they were doing something similar? Like maybe they didn't
True,
need
true.
to, for maybe it was built really well initially, but then it's been worked on. Well, there is more, not ancient, but we know more modern times too. But who's not to say that dynastic Egyptians weren't mending this thing, or
Yeah,
whatever.
that's a good point. They might have been putting a fucking ancient slacking on there to keep it from eroding too.
Right. And then, like that's the other thing about the dating of the Sphinx too. Is you talk to like some of the, I've talked to, there's an Egyptologist on Reddit I was going back and forth with, and he kept saying, well, the layers of shoal, which is a type of stone, cut across a certain way, so we know it was based. But he would never address the
Wait, what
vertical.
was he saying?
Okay, so like shoal is like a type of stone, and
Okay.
that's what the layers, like different, there's like layer 1, layer 2, layer 3 of the Sphinx, and he was saying that correlates with the level, like the area around there. But I was coming back at him and I was saying, well, that's fine. I'm not disputing that. However, what's up with the vertical water fissures around the base of the Sphinx? And he's like, well, that's just wind erosion. Okay, well, I pulled up every picture of wind erosion I could find, and I couldn't find one pattern the same. It was
Yeah.
all like Arizona, Utah, those freestanding uh,
Yeah, like Sedona.
Sedona, but those like freestanding structures you see in like
Right. Yeah,
Utah
and
and stuff like. Okay, so that's a lot of wind erosion. You don't get the same patterns. So unless the wind changed from, instead of east to west, north to south, and was blowing towards, like that,
hey.
that's the only way I could see. And I'm not a geologist, but we took science classes throughout our whole lives. I understand the concepts of it, and a vertical water fissure is pretty obvious compared to sideways wind patterns. So
Yeah.
I'm just saying, like,
Seems like
even.
one idea will arise and then it'll be
And then
contradictory
the
to
guy's like,
something
"Oh,
else.
well, you're the one with the crazy idea, so you're the one that has to come up with the evidence and convince me, because I'm, like that's in debates. That's what they say. It's like, oh, I'm standing from the point of, um,
The
yeah,
outsider.
no, 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 not me. I'm just saying, like, when somebody, whether it's an academic, for the most part, they'll say, "Oh, I'm coming from the point of reason," or "I'm coming from the point that we all know to be
They're
true,"
coming
or
well, they're coming from the point of the book. That's what my point
right,
is.
right,
You're
it
coming from the outside, but it's like your
right,
shit.
and
It's
they're
not that.
saying that it's my, in a debate or going, when an exchange or whatever, that it's on me to come up with the evidence to change that, and
Right,
that's fine, and I get that. I'm not a scientist, so obviously I'm not going to get to Egypt anytime soon and do this work, but in terms of I can read things, I can know things, I can look at things, I don't have to be there to
right.
understand, and I don't think a lot of these people talking about this are, like there's
Well,
I
no,
think
it's
there's
like you it's like they scored a goal, and we have to provide undisputable evidence against that goal going in, or it's gonna stand.
right.
But the problem is the ref's a dumb bastard in the first place. So that's the problem. Like we don't know who the refs were that were calling these games, and now we have to
Right.
provide undisputable evidence to overthrow the ruling.
Right.
That's the problem. But I
So,
mean, you're fighting the battles on Reddit, one by
well, I
one.
mean, I stopped. I've actually recently. Well, no, it's the same shit. It's like the same people saying the same thing. There's very few, um, unless something big comes out in like the news or the media. There's just the same people talking about the same shit, and I like to evolve my ideas and opinions and different things. And if I'm
Uh-huh.
not getting something out of something, whether it's a going back and forth or, some of these people, all they want to do is just win a debate. They're not
Well,
really
yeah,
trying to educate people. Like if you're a scientist or an academic and you're on Reddit, you shouldn't be getting in fights with everyday people about this shit because that's your job. It would be like a doctor, um, getting in a fight with somebody about diseases and different. It's like that's your job. You should know better. There shouldn't be a point where you're descending or you're
yeah,
dissenting to anybody. It's just one of those things where it's like you should be teaching people, if anything, and if somebody gets you mad, you don't have to say anything. And I'm not saying for those people not to have debates and different things, but I'm just saying there's no reason to talk down to people. It's like that's your field that you chose, just like I chose, real estate, or you chose photography. If one of those people came at us about our shit, we would know what's up, basically. So I get that
I
where
try
the
and learn a little bit. You never know.
exactly, but I get where they're coming from in the sense that like that's their field that they chose. However, what I'm trying to say is
Yeah,
is
yeah.
is that within
It,
my field, if somebody came at me like and had questions, I wouldn't be start shitting on them from the get
yeah.
go. I would say, listen, this is how this goes. And if they still have a problem with something, I'd be like, I can't help you anymore. Like that's just what it is. So that's kind of, some of these people
Right.
get frustrated, like they got to beat their idea into this person. And
Yeah.
like I said before, even the mainstream theories have subsets. So it's like, what are we supposed to believe? If you say, oh, internal ramp theory, they'll say no, external ramp theory. And if you say external ramp theory, no, pulley system with slaves. If you say that, it's just always something different. So,
Yeah.
um, look, we just won't unless we find something, like ancient Egyptians talk about Zeptepi the first time, which is probably roughly 30,000 years ago. If that's the case, then there's probably no physical evidence for that, whether if that
Hmm.
was the first breakthrough for humanity and ingenuity and stuff like that. There's not going to be any. We might find some sort of broken ass down, um, structures. I mean, there's this place outside, uh, Egypt by the border of Sudan called Nafta Playa, which is a like a Stonehenge type structure that they think was a precursor to Egyptian culture. So there are things out there. There are things waiting to be found. There's many theories, but we could sit here and talk about this all day. The reality is we may never know. Um, but it's fucking fun to talk about now, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. It's interesting. It just supports our fact that the books are kind of whack at this point, but
Well,
I regress.
textbooks on a certain level are. So I don't understand how that works either. Because if you think about the new stuff that we've learned in science, um, like what if the Younger Dryas impact theory gets proven with this
Yeah.
Hiawatha crater? They just found another new crater the other day. What if, we find out that the Egyptian timeline is older? What if we find out Göbekli Tepe had, we found out more information about that further proves other theories on what was going on. Like what if we find these things? At what point do the textbooks change? Because even if they become like a reality, I could still see there being pushback, like, oh, we're not going to change our books or we're not going to amend our books. You literally have to throw away all the books and create new
Yeah.
books. So
Well, could you imagine like doing a project in school these days? You go online to find research, and you don't know you don't know what's true or not. You're like, oh, I'm gonna cite this site. I'm gonna cite this site.
well, wouldn't
Graham
that
Hancock's a reputable man.
would
Seriously, they like these guys are scientists too. I can't fucking
well, Graham
take.
Hancock's a journalist, but and an
Oh,
author,
all
but
right.
he's not a
Yeah.
scientist. But like Robert Bivall is an engineer. I mean, Robert Schoch is, he is a geologist. So when you look at Robert Schoch stuff, whether it's his Easter Island work, his Göbekli Tepe stuff, or his ancient Egyptian stuff, he does have a background in that. So he is one of the more qualified people. Not that the other people aren't qualified. I think Graham Hancock actually has the most, um,
That just shows how
the
stupid
most
I am.
information, the most information. Like I think he goes to all these places and like will ask, like when Graham Hancock studied Göbekli Tepe, he went and hung out with Klaus Schmidt, who was the main German archaeologist before he passed away and stuff like that. So he is talking with these people. He's having debates with these people. So he is doing the work. He's going to the
Yeah.
spots. He's, which is more
No,
than
he's
most
taking
people.
facts and then making his
Right. He's
own
taking things,
hypothesis
he's
with
trying
it.
to piece things together from his perspective. And I think, Fingerprints of the Gods, Magicians of the Gods are some of my favorite, you know, of his work. I like his nonfiction. But yeah, I mean, it doesn't. Here's the thing: is it shouldn't matter either. If you're a smart person and you feel like you've got a cool theory on something, it shouldn't be dismissed or like that's. I think the main problem with all of this is if I was, let's say hypothetically, I was this math genius, okay, and I came up with all these theories or theorems or equations and different things. Should it matter if I went to school or not? If I have this amazing gift, you know what I'm saying? So, I mean, there are people out there like that have this amazing gift to piece things together, recognize patterns, put stuff together that maybe don't have the background that other people do.
Yeah. Yeah, geniuses are being born all over the world now if they're brought into society and then, filtered up through the schooling system to give labels to them. That's one thing, but I'm sure a lot of them don't. A lot of them slip through the cracks. So,
Well, an easy correlation would be like music, like a musician that didn't go to music school or understands music theory, but is a sick musician. Like look at
right.
Flea. This guy's unbelievable at the bass, but he just recently went back to school to learn music theory within, I think, the last few years or whatever.
Oh, that's cool. Well, that just shows you though. It's always a learn. Life is a
Or
learn.
the
You know.
guitarist from Ween. This guy doesn't know how to play the guitar. Like if you watch his interviews, he's like, "Yeah, I don't know what I'm doing." He's like, "I'm just play the blue
He
sky
feels it
solo
though.
over everything." Like
Yeah. And
so.
I've cried to some of his guitar solos.
So it just goes to show you, like you don't need to now. And there are a lot of crackpot stuff out there too. Like some of again, I like watching Ancient Aliens. I find it
This guy
entertaining.
loves this show. He mentions them in every episode.
I don't like when I don't like when they say ancient aliens came down and built these fucking things. I don't like that. I think it takes away from that show because I think there are like I've said before, 10-20% of the show's interesting and like the historical
Yeah.
stuff's accurate, and then they get into the stuff about like how ancients built that and ancient
Well,
aliens
that's like
built
such a cop out too. It's like,
it is
wow,
it is a
don't give
cap.
humans any credit, asshole.
Well, because even if there was evidence, like the pictures of like there are carvings that look like aliens, there are stuff that looks like aliens, there are stuff that looks like space machines and spaceships and different stuff. I'm not disputing that. There are things that look like that, but you have to look at, you can't go in with confirmation bias either. Oh, they just built this, they built that, because that's
Yeah.
now people are thinking that they built everything. Well, no, we built the shit. Maybe we were divinely inspired. Maybe these people were taking psychedelics, had a psychedelic experience, talked to an alien, talked to an entity, and then decided to build it. That I could get behind because we know about DMT, we know about consciousness, we know these things can be altered, we know people experience entities and different things on that. So that I would be more on board with, but a spaceship
Yeah.
coming down and building it, no. And if they were, wouldn't this thing be even more pristine. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Like it would
I mean,
be
that's some junk if that's coming from an alien. That's
yeah,
a
yeah. So, hey,
that's a
um,
piece of junk.
but but I
This
think I'll
lasts millions of years, man.
but
It's
yeah, but
shit.
I think that, you know, like I said, some of a small portion of the show's good, and if nothing else, and I've mentioned this before, if nothing else, that show brings stuff like Gobekli Tepe and stuff, and people that millions of people watch this shit. And
Yeah,
those
but
are
does it do it harm? Does it
well,
do it
what I'm saying is
better?
millions of people wouldn't have known about Gobekli Tepe if it wasn't for that. Millions of people wouldn't have known about all these ancient sites all over the world. I
Yeah,
think
but
that's
now they know about them and they think aliens built them. What's
well,
the
but the other thing too is like if the show, let's just say hypothetically, the show is just about like ancient sites, okay, or ancient megalithic structures or whatever. I think those same people would probably watch that show. I don't think it's predicated on aliens. I just think that that was like the gateway into that
Yeah,
whole realm, you know? So,
right.
hey, I mean, you know, and here's the other thing, if you're smart enough, you'll see through the bullshit, you know, like it's exciting to watch, you know, but like I said, if you have a brain, you know, okay, well that's not possible. So you know
I
the
don't know,
things
man. A lot of these people they see it on TV. It's got to be true.
well, that's their problem then. They have confirmation bias going in. They're not really doing, and that's the other thing is people aren't doing research. So yeah, there are people that just think aliens did that and aliens did this. But then there's a whole um group of people recently I've seen articles where
But isn't that how like the whole flat Earth shit starts?
yeah, but okay, so
Seriously.
besides that, besides that, that is how that's just, and that's why YouTube's taken action with some of their no, they I don't know if you know this, they recently
No.
came out with a thing. They're stopped recommending conspiracy videos. So like if you're not allowed to go down that rabbit hole anymore because they've taken that away. They're no longer recommending video after video after video of all this stuff. So it snowballs. So you're like some, you know, you're
Yeah, I
watching the
don't
shit
agree.
all
I
night.
don't think they. I don't think they should. They shouldn't be allowed to take it fully off. But yeah, that's I get it.
But they're not, I think they've shut down some people. Some crazy people should, of course. I think there are some crazy fucking things out there, but
Right, right.
for the most part, everything's still intact. Like you're allowed to put your
Because
videos
you
up if
should be able to say. I should say the fucking Earth's a square. You know, I should be able to say whatever I want.
no, and that I think there's those channels are still on there. They're either some of them have
Okay,
been
okay.
demonetized and other ones that are not as egregious have just been not recommended. So that's why I like to stay away from those topics too. It's not because oh, I'm afraid of YouTube or anything like that. It's more
Yeah,
along the lines of I don't believe a lot of that shit. So why am I'm not even going to associate with that, you know?
yeah,
Um,
that's a good point.
but this, I mean, the ancient alien things. If you're going to talk about all that shit, though, it's probably one of the more credible ones. I don't think it's true, but I think it's one of the more credible ones. So, but like I said,
Yeah, you
people
got a good point there.
maybe people wouldn't know about it if it wasn't for that show. Maybe people would still watch that show if it didn't just have all the alien stuff in it or had like a little touch of alien stuff in there, but not ancient alien theorists say yes, you know.
Yeah.
Um so
Cha-ching, cha-ching.
yeah, it's a real, it's like anything else. It's a real grabber, a real money maker, you know.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
it's entertaining.
Clickbait.
It's entertaining. I was watching something where it was some sort of interview where the guy was like, "Yeah, I know academics that watch that show just because it's entertaining, not necessarily because they're believing every word that it said. It's just like anything else, like a guilty pleasure, you know." Um, but you know, so that's pretty much the gambit, though, on how they think this stuff was constructed, the timelines
Oh,
and
it
the
is a
different
gambit. That's a very good fucking explanation for it. Because
uh
you go one way, you got to go this way. Then this contradicts this, and then boom, boom, boom. Now you got a whole big argument over it. So I'm glad
well
we
maybe
sorted it all out, and everybody knows how they were built now.
uh but maybe that's the point. Maybe that's the point of the pyramid. It's like look at this simple structure just built
Yeah.
on level after level after level after level till it gets this pristine top thing. You know, we're all fighting about all this different shit. In reality, we're not looking
Yeah.
at the lesson, which is
Yeah.
you put one foot in front of the other, you know.
Yeah. And don't
Um
fight each other. Just,
yeah. So I
it's
mean,
the biggest Rubik's Cube known to man.
well, actually, I'm sorry. Let's talk about one more thing.
Yeah, hit it up.
So we didn't even get into this, which is an important factor, but most people believe, obviously, that these are tombs. This was Khafre's tomb, and um,
Uh-huh.
that there's a sarcophagus in there, and there is a sarcophagus, but it had no lid. What happened to the lid? I think they might have it. I don't know. Right now, there's no lid on the top. And the dimensions are tight. Like if Egyptian people were smaller back then, I think. I'm not sure. This is how it was explained to me.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so somebody could have possibly fit in there. It's not like it's too small, but if you got somebody that was super big, they might not fit so comfortably in there or even at all.
Yeah, these fat cat pharaohs aren't fitting in there.
Yeah, or if you're like 6'5" or six, you could be some tall ass dude and not fit in there. But there is a theory that maybe you were talking about, like now we those physicists just did those experiments recently. You know how we were talking about that with that Lee Adams forum, how they just did all those different spectrum graphs, and they showed all the different how the energy flows from the bottom, like through the top of the
Yeah,
Great Pyramid. So,
yeah.
like one of the theories of like the mystical side of things, or
Oh, mystical Maisie, here we go.
the occult sector, is that it might have been some sort of like meditation or chamber that maybe the pharaoh would lay there and transport somewhere, or maybe take a psychedelic. I mean,
Yeah, I like that theory. I
even
remember
what if you
talking
got
about
in
that.
there and there was like air that could get in there, but you
Like a
were in,
deprivation chamber to
yeah, but
some
you were it's
degree.
super dark. Like you sent me that video of that Asian guy from that London Real video that was talking about how DMT and stuff.
Yeah.
That Asian guy claimed that if you go 2 weeks, and he said he's done this, if you go 2 weeks
Oh, yeah, yeah, I remember
without
that.
light, like if you're in a dark room for 2 weeks with no light, your brain starts to release DMT,
Mhm,
supposedly, according to this guy who's
mhm.
studied with monks and was a monk or whatever. But
Right.
he's saying he doesn't take that stuff. He has, but he doesn't take it anymore because you can activate those things yourself. So who's not to say these people were in these uh, deprivation chambers or whatever, and they were communicating with the gods. They were seeing Thoth. They were seeing Anubis. They were seeing, like they were seeing Osiris. They were seeing all these things on either, like the Blue Lotus is pictured a lot. It's considered a hypnotic psychedelic. Um, Acacia is plentiful there, but maybe they didn't need that. Maybe they were just, locking themselves in these chambers and just hallucinating balls with inside this pyramid, and it was some sort of sending them to the stars, what they thought, or sending them to the gods to communicate or whatever. Back then too, were they advanced? Sure, but I think we have pretty good back then we know for the most part their medicine, and back in ancient times, was not obviously as good. They didn't have antibiotics and vaccines and different things like that. So maybe um, from the medical side of things, they didn't understand what was happening, so they thought that they were communicating. And even if that was the case, that they were doing that, like going on a DMT trip or deprivation trip or whatever, maybe they still were experiencing that, but we're on the cusp now of actually analyzing those things and trying to figure out what's going on.
Yeah, I've always had that thought that, it's your final goal is to be able to ascend without drugs, so that's a pretty good theory for sure. I
I
like
mean,
that one.
I'm on that trip myself. I don't think you need, we've had many episodes on psychedelics and DMT. I don't think you need those things. I'm not saying don't do them or experiment or whatever. I'm saying I think you can meditate, um and let's say you didn't smoke pot for 2 weeks or ever or whatever. You can get psychedelic experiences from that, depending on if you eat it, or um maybe you smoke and then meditate or whatever. There are
Mhm.
things that can do that. But yeah, I don't know. It's just one of those things. But yeah, I just wanted to touch
Yeah,
on.
cool. I'm glad you brought that one up. I remember talking about that. The creating of DMT when you're, sequestered to a dark room for a certain amount of time. I'll have to
I
do
mean,
some more research on that. We'll talk about it again on a
I
different
think you go
episode.
crazy too, though. Think about it. I mean,
Yeah.
I can't even imagine, being in
That's what
it.
this kid told me in high school. He goes, "Oh man," he goes, "you guys are taking acid this weekend?" He goes, "Try this shit. Lock yourself in a car for 2 days. You'll see some shit." I was like, "Dude, no, I don't want to do that. What the fuck?" Because
Sounds
that's how you get
terrible.
fucked
Sounds
up, man.
worse than jail.
Well, the kid's dead now, so you know. No, I don't know.
Oh, Jesus.
No, he's not. I don't think at
Dark
least.
as shit. Donnie Darko over here.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, folks. Well, we got some episodes coming up next week, so stay tuned. And
Yeah, what is that? Tuesday at 3
Tuesday at 3 p.m. Eastern time.
Eastern time.
And it's actually a psychedelic episode, so I hope you enjoy.
Oh, all right. Cheers, everyone. Enjoy your
Peace.
V-Day.